Thank you for listening to We Have Ways of Making You Talk. Sign up to our Patreon to receive bonus content, live streams, and our weekly newsletter with money off books and museum visits as well, plus early access to all live show tickets. That's patreon.com/wehaveways.
Of the Allied Expeditionary Force. You are about to embark upon the great crusade toward which we have striven these many months. The eyes of the world are upon you.
On the eve of this great adventure, I send my best wishes to every soldier in the Allied fleet.
The tide has turned. The free men of the world are marching together to victory. I have full confidence in your courage, devotion to duty, and skill in battle. We will accept nothing less than full victory. Good luck, and let us all beseech the blessing of Almighty God upon this great and noble undertaking.
Up 0500 hours, cold, wet, sea rough. Stand to for 0700. This is it. Land visible through mist by 6:30. Rain cleared. Running for beach by 0700. Under fire by 0710. Beached 7:25. Lawrence Biddle, Brigade Major, asked for volunteers. Unroll coconut matting at prow ship. I and 3-4 others volunteered. Took places behind roll. See nothing but good front cover. As beached, hit mine. Man either side of me wounded. One lost leg. I was blown backwards onto Bren carrier, but okay. Landing doors jammed. Gave morphine injections and rough dressings to injured men and helped them put in chain hatches. Ship's officer released doors and ramp. We rolled matting out. Water about 6 feet deep. Sea rough. Matting would not sink. Shellfire pretty hot. Infantry carriers, jeeps, bailing, but left us to matting as tanks revved up. Washed aside, but made it to beach, though I had a hell of a pain in left side. That was Padre Leslie Skinner. I think he's is he a captain or a major? I can't remember off the top of my head. Captain. That's his diary, his D-Day entry in his diary on the 6th of June. He's actually an hour early on absolutely everything, so it should be stand to 0800. But
right. Well, whatever.
What I love about that entry is it really does suggest the tension, the chaos, the confusion.
Well, and the here it is now of the moment.
And the here it is now of it, yeah.
All the rehearsal they've done, all the training and all the mental rehearsal they've done to prepare themselves for that moment. Here is that moment. Here is the second front. This is it, as he says.
Yeah, this is it.
The second front, although, of course, we qualify that. We know about Italy, everybody, don't panic. But this is it. This is it. The 5 beach landings, the 5 invasions of Normandy. In fact, we've already had 2 invasions of Normandy in the middle of the night. But so there's been two invasions. So
this is invasion 3 to 7.
Yes, it's invasion 3 to 7. And Skinner is on Gold Beach, yes?
Yes, he's on Gold Beach. So the British are landing between an hour and an hour quarter later. So Juno landing, the Canadians landing at 7:45.
Because of the way the tides on the shore all work out.
Yeah, and offshore shoals and all sorts of stuff. Yeah. I mean, in a way, we should do it kind of sort of, west to east, but we're not going to. We're going to start with Omaha because, let's face it, when it comes to D-Day, it's the one everyone knows about. Bloody Omaha, Saving Private Ryan. All the rest of it, and I think it's worth kicking off with that. Okay, and so men are the infantry, they've got through the minefield. Those minefields have been cleared. Those 2 channels, they're off the coast, sort of 7 miles out. They're getting lowered into LCAs, which are British, and LCVPs, which are the Higgins craft, from around 3 a.m. To around 5 a.m. Something like that sort of 2-hour window. Yep. And then what they're doing is they're then beetling around in circles until they've all got up, so they can all come in together as a kind of, as a company or whatever. It sort
of looks like a synchronized swimming thing, doesn't it? Where they're all
it does a little bit, yeah.
Turning around and lining up and making sure they're all in the right place.
Yeah, and from around 5 a.m., the coast is starting to emerge. You can see it in the kind of murky first rays of dawn, first light of dawn. It's cloudy, it's overcast, it's drizzling. The smoke from guns and all that kind of stuff. So it's pretty murky. 36 men per LCA plus 4 British crew. And actually, it is mostly British Royal Navy crews that are taking the men to Omaha.
Is that a platoon, 36 men, or is it a platoon?
It's an assault platoon.
It's an assault platoon.
It's an assault platoon because they're not their normal platoons. This is one of the problems is they slightly lose unit cohesion because they've also got engineers with them. Assault engineers. And so that means you can't go in as a full strength platoon, which means some men are kind of siphoned off into another platoon and so on and so forth. And so you're taking a slight hit on small unit leadership as a result of that.
Yeah, they're constrained in how many men they can put together. And so this is a sort of contingency that they've had to do.
Yep.
It causes a bit of a problem because basically you're not with the guys you've trained with all the way through. You're not with the sergeant you're used to and all that.
No, and once you've got out of your assault platoons, once you've landed on the beaches, you will then be put into a different, back into your traditional platoon, which will then look very different anyway because half of you are dead or wounded or whatever.
So I mean, it's interesting that's a hitch, isn't it? That might cause you a problem as things go forward.
Potentially.
And they've got an assault vest, a life belt, bandoliers, grenades, the main weapon, which will be a Garand M1 generally.
Yep.
Automatic rifle or semi-automatic rifle, and the swell is actually worse than it was 24 hours previously. So the great delay. If they'd gone, and the waves are sort of 6 to 8 feet. So what is it? A force 4 or force 5? It's something like that on the Beaufort scale.
It's force 4 or 5, and that when you're talking about a 6 foot, 8 foot wave, that is the top of the wave smacking. So it's not universally kind of 6 foot. 8 foot high. It's just the kind of sort of very peak.
But it's not ideal. And boats that don't draw, so they're getting blown about as well because they don't draw very much, the landing craft. Yeah. And having been out, we went out out of Portsmouth, didn't we, with Stephen Fisher. And I filmed in them a couple of times as well. You do get the feeling you might, if there were a wind or heavy tide, you'd get moved about quite easily because you're really not drawing very much.
And of course, this is a feature of every single part of these beach invasions, is they all get pushed one way, and it's either south or further east, and that's because the prevailing wind is cutting against them, and it is just completely unavoidable. And this is because the side of your landing craft, or your assault craft, is effectively a sail. It's flat and it hasn't got much to stabilize it, and the wind is pushing directly against that, 90 degrees effectively. So of course that's going to happen.
Yeah.
Omaha Beach itself is long. It's ever so slightly concave. It's about 5 miles long, and it's divided into 4 sectors, which is Charlie, Dog, Easy, and Fox. And then each of those are divided again into green, white, and red. So you have Easy Red, Easy White, Dog Green, Dog White, all that kind of stuff. And inevitably, the focus tends to be on certain areas. So you've got 13 Widerstand-Nester, these strong points, directly overlooking the beach, and a further 2 just a little bit inland. So there's 15 effectively covering Omaha Beach. And the strongest bits are against these 2 draws. So there's 4 draws. And what we mean by a draw is a sort of exit off the beach. So you've got these bluffs, which are, what are they in height? Not quite 200 feet, I'd say. They're more like
more like 150 feet. And
150 feet.
And if you look at them from a distance, the draws are like missing teeth, basically, aren't they? They're the gaps that you can get through.
Right.
Coming off the beach. Those are solid, though. It's not dunes we're talking about. These are solid features.
Yes, and they curve inwards. So from a German's point of view, that's a shocker because you're in sight the whole time. It's not like a sort of steep cliff or anything like that. It is curving in towards the land. 2 of the draws, the Verville draw on the western end and the Colville draw on the eastern end, are really obvious. They're clearly where you put, from a defensive point of view, that's where you put the bulk of your Widerstand-Nester, your strong points, and those are the kind of the most heavily defended bits. But there are large stretches of that. So each of those is about a mile inland of the 5 miles. Yeah. So if you're going from sort of west to east, a mile 1 and a bit is Verville. Mile 4 is Colville, if you see what I mean. But in between are the other 2, and there are bits which have no direct fire over them. Yeah. So between these Widerstand-Nester, there are gaps along those bluffs.
Which essentially amount to dead ground that the Americans can get into.
Yes. And the other thing is that the beach is sandy at low tide, but then very quickly turns into gravel. Yeah. Weirdly, if you go there and visit now, there's no gravel at all. It's been completely cleared of gravel post-war, but at the time it was gravel. Right. And at the Verville end, there is a solid man-made sea wall.
Right.
At the Colville end, which is Easy Red, opposite Colville, there's a sort of duney, boggy bit and an anti-tank ditch. Yeah. There is a seawall, but it's a natural one rather than a kind of man-made one. So that changes.
And the Americans, they're putting in 2 divisions 1st Division, 29th Division, and 2 battalions of tanks from the 741st, 743rd, who are sending in DD tanks. And the duplex drive, Sherman with a skirt that displaces the water, the Archimedes principle, everybody, and with a screw that's attached to the duplex drive of the tank. So the idea is that the driver drives the tank and he steers it like normal, and the screw steers the whole damn thing. And if you launch it far away from where it's meant to be going, you multiply the chances of it going wrong quite considerably, especially with 5 foot, 6 foot waves. And the fact that, again, they're like big sails. They're not boats.
They're 30-ton tanks.
They're 30-ton tanks. They grip everybody. Yeah. I mean, the ingenuity of the DD tank, and it's obviously it's a British thing. It's part of the sort of arsenal of funnies, although I really don't like the sort of I've a real problem with look at these funny tanks. Well, they're part of the assault.
They're deadly serious.
Deadly serious. There's nothing funny about. There's absolutely nothing funny about a crocodile, for instance. They're part of your assault equipment, and you're never going to break out if you don't break through. And this is what these are for. There's lots of stuff about how the Americans don't know what they're doing with the DDs and all this sort of stuff, isn't there? And some sort of sniffy British attitude to that. Would you say that's justified, James?
Not really, no.
Yeah.
I mean, they could have done with some flails and things like that.
Yeah.
That's always very useful. But Omaha Beach doesn't really lend itself to that. You know,
No.
what you want there is firepower. You don't want, what's your flail going to do? I mean, at the foot of a cliff.
There's a shortage of tank chassis at this point, so you can't. Not everyone can have everything they want.
No.
We're again in the allied lag of what you want for when you want it.
Yeah.
And so some of the Churchill Avery innovations and stuff, the Americans asked for them, but there aren't the chassis to deliver them. Bradley asked for some of it, and the armour isn't available. But you're right. What you need here is firepower. You need tanks in the role of mobile artillery to turn up and blow things up for you.
Yeah, and it is the Royal Navy that are bringing in those tanks, and it is the decision of the commander of the LCT, the landing craft tank, this 50-metre long assault craft.
Yeah.
It is up to them where they let you out. And the 741st, which is supporting the 1st Infantry Division, the big red one, which is going to the eastern side, eastern half of Omaha Beach, so towards Easy Red, etc. They are let out really too far out, 6,000 yards out, which is a long, long way, and all but 2 sink.
Yeah.
Whereas the Royal Navy commander of the LCTs, which is bringing in the 743rd, which is supporting the 29th Infantry Division, which is on the Verville side, the kind of western side of Omaha Beach, brings them much, much, much closer, and all but 2 arrive.
And then they come,
It's a complete opposite.
A reversal, yeah.
But one of the big problems for the 741st is that they're told that their marker is the Colville Church steeple.
Yeah.
So they're looking at that, but where they're released is at 45 degrees to that. So they're not only have they've got the prevailing wind coming and cut across them, they're also cutting across 45 degrees of the waves.
Trying to hack across the waves, yeah.
Yeah. And that's what does for them.
Yeah, and their training has not included this sort of inclement circumstance after all. So
No.
Because it can't, it actually is the thing.
No. But also supporting them are huge numbers of naval guns, which amounts to 183 naval guns of 90 millimeter or above, plus a huge number of quick-firing cannons, all of which have been turned to the horizontal rather than the vertical. And to put this in some perspective, the Germans manning those 13, 15 strong points along the Omaha Beach are about 350 men in total.
Right.
Now, there are artillery further inland, and there are more strong points and infantry inland, but protecting the crust, overlooking the Omaha Beach, are about 350 soldiers in German uniforms.
And not one gun of the kind of caliber that the naval gun.
No, there's one 88 millimeter along the whole thing.
Right. Okay.
And the rest are 75s and 50 millimeters.
Yeah.
Most of these strong points are held by between 25 and 40 men, something like that.
Yeah.
And WN62 is the strongest. This is overlooking the Colville Draw. This is overlooking Easy Red. And that's only got 27 men of the Grenadier Regiment 726, which is part of the 716th Infantry Division, which are pretty useless. And it's got 4 men of the 352nd Infantry Division.
Okay. In which case I'm going to have to ask a question, aren't I? This doesn't sound like the Germans defending Omaha particularly seriously. Why has it got this reputation for being this appalling bloodbath?
Well, because they can still bring a huge amount of fire to bear in terms of mortars.
Yeah.
A 50 millimeter cannon or a 75 millimeter anti-tank gun, fired at ranges of under 500 yards, is pretty effective.
Yeah.
and they've got lots of machine guns, and they've actually got lots of Maxim 08s and French machine guns and Hotchkisses and whatever, who just go dun 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 dun, which is exactly what you want. This is not really a job for MG42s with their rapid rate of fire, which are brilliant in an ambush or something. But what you really want is just methodical bullets just mowing people down. You want it effectively like a scythe.
Yeah.
And of course, what you've got is you've got discombobulated GIs jumping out of landing craft into water and all the rest of it, and they're sitting ducks. They've got no protection whatsoever. And it doesn't require more than 350 men to kind of cause a huge amount of damage. There are about 85 machine guns along that stretch, which amounts to quite a lot.
Yeah, and this is defending. This is what defence offers you, is that if you chuck up the weight of fire, there's not a lot the other guy can do about it.
No.
But where is it worst, though?
Well, it's worst at Easy Red and Dog White, I think it is, or Dog Green, I can't remember. But it's the bits opposite the two main draws, the Colville and the Verville draw.
Yeah.
And all this needs qualification, because when we think of Omaha Beach, we absolutely think of those 20 minutes of Saving Private Ryan.
Yeah.
And carnage everywhere and people wandering around looking for their arms.
Whereas Bradley, is on USS Augusta, a mile out, and they think this is all going very well. In fact, he actually says, Bradley says, I don't understand this lack of return fire. Do we have another Anzio? Which is kind of amazing, really.
Yeah.
That given Omaha's subsequent reputation. And then there's Pointe du Hoc, isn't there, which famously is Rangers with ladders taken from the London Fire Brigade scrambling up the cliff face. I mean, if what you want is glamorous Ranger action, then that's it.
And it's a total cakewalk. Where the Rangers really kick in is on D+1 and D+2.
Yeah.
It's not D-Day itself, which is an absolute cakewalk. There's hardly anyone there. The guns have been moved back from their gun positions on the coast.
Yeah.
So they're in a field further back. They get up there with barely a shot fired, but barely any injuries whatsoever. Move inland, disable the guns. It's job done.
Yeah.
I mean, it is literally all over by kind of 8:30 in the morning.
It goes like clockwork, really, doesn't it?
It goes absolutely like clockwork. And it's incredibly easy. It's just when the counterattack comes that's the problem, and they're running out of ammo and need to be salvaged. That's the kind of the great defense, but it is not D-Day itself.
Yeah.
And what is also really interesting is that while you've got kind of two LCAs of A Company from the 116th Infantry, which is part of the 29th Infantry, going to the Verville end, the western end, they get killed, and that's 72 men just gone, just like that.
Yeah.
And four other LCAs from A Company also land and rain and spray and smoke and all the rest of it at 6:31 a.m. And a further 91 men from A Company are cut down. So that's 72 men killed and a further 91 killed or wounded. So only 20 from Company A make it to the seawall. So that is the Bloody Omaha. That's the complete slaughter. But it's really important to understand that is not universally the case.
Yeah.
And there's absolutely no question that in very quick order, guns are being hit by those 183 90mm and above guns from the offshore naval fire. And, obviously the bottom line is if you're being pounded by a destroyer or by a heavy cruiser or battleship or even by cannons from any one of those, and you're in your machine gun nest at the top of Omaha Beach and everyone can see you, because you're in plain view because of the concave nature of the bluffs as well.
Yeah.
What are you going to do? You're going to duck down, right? So if you're ducking down in your bunker, you can't be
not holding anybody up.
Not holding anyone up.
Yeah. In a previous episode, number 597, John McManus, our We Have Ways USA collaborator, goes into great detail about Omaha Beach. And John is an every last grain of sand person when it comes to this, and every bit of gravel that, of course, is long since gone. Now, the interesting thing is at Utah Beach, which is to the west.
Well, hold on, just before we get to Utah Beach, I think it is really important just to say that, Company C from the 116th Infantry, for example, lands at Dog White at 7:10, and there's no direct strong point above them, and bushes on the bluffs are on fire, which is covering them in smoke, and they get across absolutely fine. Yeah. And you can read all these after action reports, and one of it says the enlisted men reached the shore safely. The second boat, none of the men were wounded on this run despite the small arms. Fourth boat, small arms was received, but there were no casualties between the boat and the sea wall. Fifth boat, only one casualty was incurred en route to the sea wall. And the 5th Ranger Battalion lands at 7:45, so an hour and a quarter later at Dog White. Again, there's lots of smoke and lots of blood in little pools on the beach and dead and dying all over the place and all the rest of it. But again, Lieutenant John Rahn, who's taking his men across, all 33 men get there safely, apart from one who gets hit in the leg. You know, so it's really, really not universal slaughter by any stretch of the imagination. And the thing about Omaha Beach is that by 9 o'clock, a number of these strong points have been knocked out. And it's kind of like Skittles. And once you start, you know, they're all sighted, so they're mutually supporting. And once you knock out one, the whole thing starts to unravel. And you just think about the weight of fire that's being pounded onto those German positions from those 183 guns, plus cannons, quick-firing cannons. And you start to get a set, you know, that is just out of all comparison to what is being fired onto the attackers. And if you're an unmotivated Russian or Ostbattalion infantryman or grenadier manning these positions, you know, really, you're going to stick your neck out on this one?
What's interesting about this, though, is Omaha is characterised as the sort of difficult beach, and Utah is the sort of one that's seen as a cakewalk, isn't it?
Yes.
Is the thing. Partly because of the current, they don't land quite where they're expecting to. And
they're protected a bit because they've got the Cotentin Peninsula kind of acting as a massive great windbreak.
Yeah. But I think it's interesting to contrast them, really, isn't it? Because actually, when you start to look into it, there are sticky moments at Utah too. And in fact, the issue at Utah is them getting off and joining up with everyone else becomes the problem there, rather than getting ashore. And after all, it's not just about getting ashore; it's about joining up with the other allied elements that are around you.
Yeah.
So at Utah, you've got 54 DDs and 5 Dozer Shermans.
Okay, so again, that is why it's different at Utah than it is at Omaha, because at Utah Beach, you've got dunes, and the dunes are, you know, I don't know, 15, 20 foot high, something like that. But you say you have the beach, then you have the dunes, and then behind the dunes you've got this flooded area, and then it rises, and you've got causeways which are above the flooded area. This is these 4 exit points from the Utah Beach. Then you've got this ridgeline onto which, you know, the 101st Airborne are supposed to be, and that's where Breakhorn Manor is, and you know, Dick Winters and everyone. But you need dozers because you need to be able to push a hole through the dunes. So your engineers are there to blast a hole through the dunes, then the dozers quickly through, and then your tanks can get through.
So it's an assault engineer job, really, in that respect. And marauders go over, don't they? They fly parallel rather than across, don't they?
Yes, because they're flying in north to south. Whereas on the north coast, you're still flying north to south, but you're going over. Yeah,
you've got to turn around. Yeah. If you're going to run east-west, you've got to turn, haven't you?
And you can't do that.
Yeah, you can't do that. Yeah, you can't do that with all the. I mean, there are too many
planes.
Yeah, too many moving parts, too many planes, just too difficult. Is it safe to say that really things are more straightforward? I mean, it's just different, isn't it? This is the thing. This is the thing about all of these invasions, these separate invasions. You can't really compare them that closely because they're all very, very different sets of tasks, aren't they? With their own points of tension. I mean, the DDs go in and LCTs hits a mine, and you know, before the tanks are even launched, they're blown sky high, aren't they?
Yeah.
The tanks in themselves are no guarantee of anything.
No.
But they go in at 1,500 yards. So from a mile out, essentially, in they come. They get the tanks ashore.
But not 6,000 yards, which is where they were supposed to. So again, the person in charge of the LCT has used his common sense. Thought it's a bit rough. You know, I'm going to bring a bit closer.
Well, and taking a risk. Again, assess the risk, taking the risk. Because you know, the further in he goes, the better a target he is for German gunnery, if there is any. So he's weighing, what do? Do I get these tanks ashore, or what's my actual job here? That's to get this armour ashore.
I think the thing about it is you know, it's a different stretch of coastline, but it's also, the defences here are much less developed than they are along the northern side. You know, this is very much sort of, you know, work in progress. And it's not terribly developed. The other thing is that instead of landing opposite the first 2 draws, they land opposite draws 3 and 4. So they come miles further, about 2,000 yards further south than they're supposed to.
Yes, yeah.
But, you know, who cares? I mean...
Yeah, and who's doing the defending?
Yeah, so this is... So they come across at WN5. So what's really interesting is that from Ouistreham and the Caen Canal, you start at 1... and then go all the way to whatever it is, 90. WN90, I think is the last one, something like that. Then you start again on the Cotentin Peninsula. So this is WN5 going northwards.
Right.
And it's commanded by a chap called Lieutenant Arthur Janka, who is a Knight's Cross winning Russian veteran and is now commanding the 3rd Company of Grenadier Regiment 919 of the 709th Infantry Division. And, you know, and he's experienced and competent and all the rest of it, but his men absolutely aren't. You know, these are Ostbattalion kind of conscripts these are men in German uniforms rather than German troops.
Yeah.
Lots of wire, lots of obstacles, lots of mines. It's flooded behind for 2 miles. But by the time the troops had landed, the 188mm they got at WM5 has been damaged. The 175 and 150mm have all been knocked out, as have the NG nests and ammunition bunker. And Yunker doesn't get any support whatsoever.
I mean, it's interesting because that shows what you can do if you do get your DD tanks ashore. That's actually up to the Royal Navy. I mean, that's the really interesting thing that you point that out, Jim, because the received view is, the Americans didn't know what they were doing, didn't trust the funky British funny armour. They released them too early. Think, no, not the case.
No.
Right, I'll tell you what, we'll take a quick break and then we'll work our way along the British beaches and Canadian. Let's not forget our allies in this. We don't want to piss anyone off. Anyway, we'll see you in a second. Welcome back to We Have Ways of Making You Talk, where, I don't know how we did it there, but we've just done Omaha and Utah in the time that we were planning to, Jim. That really is something
It's a miracle. It's a miracle. Yeah, that is quite special. I hope people are getting a sort of clear picture. I mean, the problem with when you're talking just verbally about D-Day, though, is there's so many different moving parts.
Yeah.
There's so much going on all at once that you end up meanwhiling quite a lot.
Yeah.
And we're going to be doing that a lot in this sort of second half. I mean, it's just completely unavoidable, I'm afraid.
Yeah. Well, where do you want to start?
Well, should we start? Let's start at Longues-sur-Mer.
Okay.
So Longues-sur-Mer, so east of Omaha Beach, the sort of cliffs continue.
So next along. So if you're doing Normandy as what did I do? I did the little finger, didn't I?
Yeah.
So the little finger is the Cotentin Peninsula. Utah is the first segment of your little finger. Omaha is the knuckle of your next finger along. Your middle finger is where we are roughly now, where our Arromanches is, yeah.
So before you get to Arromanches, before you move eastwards to Arromanches, there's another lot of cliffs, and there's 4 naval guns, huge, great big naval guns. And the Allies are very aware of them and have detailed a whole load of naval support to kind of try and knock them out.
Yeah.
2 cruisers are dominating this, HMS Ajax and HMS Argonaut. And these 4 guns have been hit very hard by heavy bombers in the weeks beforehand. So the whole area around there is pockmarked. The guns themselves are kind of, I don't know, what is it, kind of sort of 300 yards inland, and there's a kind of coastal observation bunker, and one can still go and look at these. And Ajax and Argonaut are absolutely hammering them. And basically by 6:30, the Longues-sur-Mer battery has been completely silenced. Yeah. And what is amazing is that one of the shells fired by HMS Ajax hits the breech of, I think, number 3 gun, if I remember right, or maybe it's number 2 gun. But you can still see this sort of lozenge-shaped kind of dent in the side of the breech of the gun where this shell hit. And that is unbelievable firing.
It's pretty good shooting.
Yeah, that's very, very good shooting. And I do think the Navy get left out of this a lot. There's a sort of assumption that they're going to be really good. But not only are they brilliant at minesweeping, not only are they brilliant at seamanship, they're also absolutely amazing at gunnery. Have been since before Nelson's time, and that's just a tradition that has never been lost and is absolutely to the fore in the Second World War, particularly on, D-Day is an absolute example on that. So that is those 4 guns which have the potential to really cause serious havoc, silenced basically by 6:30 that morning.
I mean, they're in the right place, aren't they? These German defences aren't just thrown together, are they? They're properly thought out, but the British have thought out the answers and the Americans have thought out the answers to these defences.
That's the truth of it. And of course, these are Kriegsmarine guns, not army guns. And so therefore, there's no coordination between the central command whatsoever, et cetera, et cetera.
Blah, blah, blah. To German command structures. We've spent some time on
4 hours, discuss. Yeah.
So now we come to Gold Beach. And who are we going to start with there?
So there's 2 brigades attacking. There's the 231 Malta Brigade. Was commanded by your great friend Roy Urquhart on Sicily, and 69 Brigade. So as you're looking at the coast, looking southwards, that's 231 Brigade on the right, on the western side, and 69 Brigade on the left eastern side.
Yeah.
And 231 Brigade, that's Jig sector. So it's the Hampshires and the Dorsets, and they're pushed too far too far east as well. So they're coming out at 45 degrees, landing completely in the wrong place. There's a problem because they're being supported by the Sherwood Rangers.
Yeah.
B squadron of the Sherwood Rangers lands exactly where they're supposed to.
Yeah.
And then finds it hasn't got any infantry support, and the infantry find they haven't got any tank support. But the long and short of it is, it kind of works out okay, and they adjust. And most of the Sherwood Rangers actually land on Jig Red, which is from kind of WN 36 onwards, but there's another WN which is 37, and there's a particularly vicious anti-tank gun, French anti-tank gun, in a little bunker which is pointing down. The embouchure is pointing down the beach.
Yeah.
So anyone landing on the beach is
in its field of fire, basically.
Yeah, in its field of fire. And of course, as we know, the sides of tanks are quite vulnerable, not the front and all the rest of it. And the big problem you've got as you're coming off the beach is that if you're a DD tank, you've got to stop to switch it out of aquatic drive into kind of normal drive.
Drop the skirts.
And you drop the skirts and all the rest of it. And of course, you're a sitting duck to an anti-tank gun, which is pointing straight at your side. And so a number of them get knocked out. First of all is Monty Hawley's tank, which is very close to this gun, so it's literally point-blank range.
Yep.
And, when you look at aerial photographs of this, you can see Monty Hawley's tank knocked out on the beach, as are a number of Avries, which are there to kind of try and clear exits from that beach. But actually, Jig Green effectively gets abandoned because they've all been pushed further to the east, and they're all landing on Jig Red, which is actually much better because once you get past WM36, you're out of sight of the gun at Le Hamel. The problem is there's a parallel lateral road.
Yeah.
And no one can use that road, which means you've got to do a really, to get inland, you've got to kind of take a much more sort of wider diverted route until that gun is knocked out. And that gun is knocked out by a member of the Essex Yeomanry in a Sexton, in a 25-pounder.
Who fires basically over open sights, doesn't he, effectively?
Yeah. Sergeant Bob Palmer. He's told to come over. A couple of tanks have been, and assault guns have been knocked out. And so he's told to hurry forward, and he rushes forward, and he gets to within about kind of 300, 400 yards of the bunker, swivels the Sexton 45 degrees. First shot hits just above the embouchure, and the second one is absolutely bullseye, goes straight through. And that's that one out. And that's just after 11 a.m.
And we have talked about this at great length with the aerial photographs in a previous episode, in which we looked at the aerial photographs, which were taken on the hour every hour, basically, where you
basically
something flies over, and you can see everything. You can make out the shapes of the British armoured vehicles. You can make out the Churchills. You can make out the porpoise ammunition carriers they're towing behind them.
Yes, exactly that.
Absolutely extraordinary.
It is absolutely amazing.
And a big part of this, of the British approach to this, is that you have 79th Armoured Division with these funny tanks, which are average. So that's an Armoured Vehicle Royal Engineers. So that's basically a thing. It tends to be it's a Churchill, which will have a huge Piat on it, basically, an enormous flying dustbin mortar. And loading that looks like a lot of fun. The chap has to come out of the side hatch, pass the round up, and then you plonk it on and you shut the lid and you fire it.
Your turn, Bob.
Jesus
really?
Christ. But an incredibly effective thing for basically knocking down houses and flattening things. But you trundle up in your very heavily armoured Churchill, and you flatten it. It's sort of the Churchill in its purest form as an infantry tank, where it's helping the infantry. It's doing its bit. So we do have an episode where we covered that in absolute fine detail. There are no crocodiles, though, are they? Because that's the buffs, isn't it? 141
D+1.
141 RTR, who are the buffs, come out on D+1. And in their war diary, it says H+65 or something. It's quite an interesting diary entry to say when.
But the great thing is they are, WM36 is knocked out in pretty quick order.
There's a little village around Le Hamel, isn't there? So they've streets to clear, and they've got to work their way through that.
Yes, and there's a sanatorium, there's a kind of health spa hospital behind the Le Hamel bunker, which has been reinforced and evacuated of patients and what have you, and has been reinforced by the Germans. So they've got to knock that out, and then they've got to push into the little village of Esnel, which is just inland a little bit. But the point about it is that actually they get ashore really, really quickly. And once Bob Palmer has knocked out Le Hamel, then they can divert tanks and infantry into clearing the rest of Le Hamel. But meanwhile, the rest of the infantry and armour are pushing inland and making great strides, because there is just the crust. There is a second line of defence, but it hasn't really been developed. And so once you get past the beach obstacles, once you get past these two strong points, it's open countryside, and your opposition is very limited. There's some artillery strong points on the top of the hill between the beach and Arromanches, But again, they're neutralised and later on in the afternoon.
Yeah.
And this side of Gold Beach is all going pretty well. And frankly, it goes pretty well on 69 Brigade's front as well. And it's the 6th Green Howers and the 5th East Yorkshires that land. Yeah. And the 6th Green Howers, of course, is Danny Hollis. And he comes out of his immortal liner when they're going into the sea, into the shore. They're handed out these Durexes these French letters to put on the end of their rifles. And he goes, I thought we were supposed to kill the Germans, not fuck them. And it's just the right tone, and it gets a laugh from everyone. And
it's in that spirit that he picks up a VC that day. I mean, it's extraordinary.
So Vers-sur-Mer is just a little bit inland, and there's a Montfleury battery, which is a really big one. And you've got the observation bits and the command and control up on the hill, on a ridge, on a slight rise, which is basically where the new Normandy Memorial, British Normandy Memorial is. And you've got the kind of the gun positions on the lower bit, just overlooking. There's also a massive anti-tank ditch cutting across the line, because there's a very obvious draw coming off the beach there. And they manage to get there, and he gets to this wall which still exists, and the road going up onto the ridge, and he turns right and charges these series of strong points and blasting them with his Tommy gun and capturing lots, and then going on to the next one, chucking in grenades, going on to the next one.
Amazing.
And that's the first part of his VC action.
I mean, it's interesting that, of course, they land in the wrong place, but they figure it out anyway.
Yeah, and I was actually, my first ever trip to Normandy was in 2004, and I was on the section of beach where 69 Brigade landed with some of the 6th Green Howard veterans, including one of the company commanders. He was called Bojo something. I can't remember what his surname was, but he was rather amazing. Had a tiny little service on the beach, and then we all moved inland. So we were with them. And this is where my friend Paddy said to him, so, at the end of D-Day, what are you doing? You sort of pitching camp? And this Yorkshireman, pitch camp? No, we didn't fucking pitch camp. It's fucking D-Day.
Brilliant.
It's really funny. That put him in his place.
And then next door, so let's keep moving east. So Juno is next door.
Landing at 7:45 a.m.
Yeah. You've got HMS Belfast and HMS Diadem offering support. The Germans do have some artillery here, though. They have 400mm guns. They have anti-aircraft guns as well, 50s and 88s.
Yeah. They've got more here at Juno than they have at Omaha Beach.
Yeah, exactly. And it's two assault brigades of the Canadians from 3rd Infantry Division, the Canadian 3rd Infantry Division. So this is a Canadian show, isn't it? It's
completely a Canadian show, and they're both landing. They're landing onto, well, at Bernier it's less. It's a bit more kind of open beach, but there are still buildings. But 7th Infantry Brigade, they're landing directly onto Saint-Aubin.
Yeah,
and you can go there now, and there's still a kind of 50mm gun in its bunker overlooking the beach, and there's a serious sea wall. I mean, it's kind of 15, 20 foot high off the beach. There's a very famous picture of a P-47 sort of crash landing on the beach there, and you can marry that view up. Absolutely, it's a brilliant place to do then and now. So you can absolutely marry it up. What the Canadians, where they go wrong at Saint-Aubin is that the roads leading off the main kind of corniche are really narrow. They're too narrow for Shermans.
Right.
And for armour. So it has to be an infantry job. And what they find is that they're going in and they're just basically clearing it house to house to house. God. And all those houses overlooking the beach have all been reinforced in the cellars.
Yeah.
And a guy I got to know called Eldon Roberts, known as Bob Roberts, was only about 5'2", and he was a Bren gunner, and he was second man ashore in the 7th Infantry Brigade onto Saint-Aubin, and he went inland, and they were clearing a house, and they went into one house, and the French family was still there, and they signalled to them that there was a hatch in the door leading down to the cellar. So they went down and realised that the cellar had been knocked through, and there was a kind of tunnel that led through to an embouchure at the front, which was being manned by Germans. So they then came back out again and went and found their kind of, their platoon commander and said, what do we do about this? And he goes, just take them out. So Bob Roberts went down with his Bren gun, and his mate Lacroix, who was a French speaker, which is how he could communicate with the French, with a flamethrower. And they went into this bunker, and they stood behind it, and he kneecapped them all with his Bren gun, and then they licked it with set fire to them.
Oh, God. Brutal.
Yeah.
But for all this, though, the Canadians get ashore in pretty good order as well, don't they?
I mean, they do incredibly well. They really do incredibly well. I mean, they have incredible offshore naval support, again, from a huge array of 12 6-inch guns, 8 5.25 inch, 29 4.7 inch, 16 4-inch. I mean, that's a hell of a lot of gunfire. It's not quite as much as you're getting at Omaha, but it's still 65 guns firing at over 100 millimeter.
Yeah, it's a fair chunk of firepower.
That's a fair chunk of firepower. But yeah, they do. They get in. They have a terrible time, particularly in 8th Infantry Brigade. They have a lot of trouble with mines and wire and machine guns and all the rest of it. And they take really, really, really heavy hits, but they do incredibly well. I mean, the Canadians, again, as they always do in every part of the war, they're always punching above their weight, and they do here as well.
I mean, and the thing is, we've worked our way across to this. The toughest, let's say it, the toughest nut to crack of the lot, which is Sword Beach.
Yep.
Apart from the fact, obviously, it's the further east you go, the more likely the Germans are to have finished the defences. It's the basic truth. But also, you can only land a brigade there because of the offshore shoals, which mean you can't put a division ashore.
Because there's enough space.
No.
And already as it is, 3rd Division has been massively swollen to incorporate the 1st Special Service Brigade, of the Commandos, which includes the only French troops involved in it. So they've got one job, which is to clear Ouistreham, which is a town right on the corner where the ferry now comes in, and move up as quickly as possible to relieve the paratroopers and the airborne troops at Pegasus and Horsa.
Yeah.
So that's their job. They've got to get ashore, turn left, clear along the rest of the coast, then move north. Meanwhile, 3rd Infantry Division, the infantry, of which, effectively is 2 brigades, but only 2 battalions up front, have got to get ashore, clear a whole series of defensive positions, which have been masterminded by a really, really good engineer called Oberst Ludwig Krug. And Oberst, Colonel Krug, has cited these all brilliantly because he's he knows what he's doing. So they've all been done very well. And there's absolutely no question that this is the strongest, in terms of strong points, this is the strongest strong points along the whole stretch. So obviously, from a German point of view, you're going to want to make greater effort closer to Le Havre and, the eastern end of it. Yeah. Because it's a very obvious landing point, and also just the further away you are, the further away you are. So the effort hasn't, not quite such the same degree of effort has been made. And also because of the swell and everything, the high tide is much higher than it normally is. Yeah. Which means that suddenly, and also the engineers, they've got offshore, but they've come under withering machine gun fire, and they're smelling cordite and all the rest of it, and chattering machine guns. And there isn't much room for manoeuvre, and they don't clear enough exits off the beach quickly enough, which suddenly means you've still got all these landing craft. They need to get these guys off. So there's horrible bunching on the beaches of tanks and armour, and getting them off the beach. There's basically a log jam. And although they managed to get rid of, all these strong points right on the coast have been knocked out very quickly, like cod. The other two, Morris and Hillman, Morris gets taken out quite quickly, but Hillman is the big obstacle, which is on the ridge. And if anyone ever goes to Hillman, you really can see why this is such a dominating position, because it's south of Caen, it's blocking Caen. You can see all the way to Ouistreham and the Caen Canal and beyond. You can look all the way westwards toward the Canadian landing beach of Juno around Douve and towards Saint-Aubin. You can see all that absolutely clearly. And anyone coming off the beaches in front of you is in a cone of protective fire from Hillman. Yeah. And until you've neutralised Hillman, you're not going to get past.
I mean, let alone get to Caen.
Yeah. So that is the objective for the infantry, is to get to Caen, which is 10 miles from the beaches. And again, you have to remember that this is commanded by, Second Army is now commanded by Miles Dempsey, who a year earlier on Sicily was commanding 13 Corps, and 13 Corps did 10 miles on D-Day on Sicily. So there's precedence for it. And it's absolutely fine to give your men an objective, which is at the outer reach of what is possible.
Yeah, of course it is.
Because you don't want to be reaching your objective and then go, what do we do now, boss?
Yeah, well, because the one thing they do worry about in the British Army is people stopping. That they go, well, we've got as far as we can go.
Let's have a cup of tea.
So we'll have a cup of tea. I mean, they do genuinely worry about that junior officer initiative problem, where unless they know what they've got to do, there's a tendency not to do anything.
But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because that's not the point. The point is to secure your bridgehead. And again, here there is not a single beach where they don't get ashore. Yeah. They do smash the crust. Yeah. And smashing the crust is what D-Day is all about.
Yeah. So by 9 a.m., Special Service Brigade is ashore, 4-5 Royal Marine Commando as well. And of course, Lord Lovett's not wearing a white a white sweater. And there's a very funny, angry letter, that exchange of letters between him and John Howard going, they've all seen the film and it's ruined them. All their memories have been corrupted by this film, I'm afraid, by The Longest Day.
By this filth of saying that I was wearing a white polo neck sweater.
Exactly. And whatever rifle he's carrying is wrong as well and all that sort of stuff.
His father was one of the founders of the Forestry Commission.
Amazing. Well,
Just what I say.
Every family has its hidden treasures. And the fusilier marin commando under Capitaine Philippe Kiefer come ashore, and they take the casino, don't they, in Weestrum, which is a strong point for the Germans by this.
Yeah, they have a bit of scrap. I mean, it's interesting because when you go there now, there's literally Avenue Kiefer and Rue de Kiefer everywhere.
Well, John Keegan always basically, in his Six Armies in Normandy, sort of sums up going, give it 100 years and the French will have done the whole of the Normandy invasion. So I just think it's a funny point. But by 9 a.m., the Allies have a proper foothold. Troops are ashore. Most of the crust is subdued, which is, after all, the thing you are trying to achieve that morning.
Yep.
And by 10 a.m., the Ox and Bucks as well, D Company Ox and Bucks, have been, well, they've been relieved not long after midnight by 7 Para.
Yep.
By Pine Coffin and his chaps.
Yep.
And Richard Todd, ironically, and all that.
Yep.
Who jump in sort of midnight, don't they?
Yep.
And the Germans have got no answer to that.
They've got no answer.
And so they're basically now waiting for the landing force to catch up with them. And I think the first thing to get to Pegasus Bridge is an RASC lorry, actually, or an RASC recce sort of contingent. Because after all, everything's happening all at once. As you said earlier, it's all a massive meanwhile. And everyone's diaries differ. They all say, well, we were there by noon. Well, they can't all have arrived at once. It's impossible. No. And there's a tendency for the diary to be written up at the end of the day going, what time do we get there? Oh, I don't know, about midday.
That'll do.
But the Germans are completely all over the shop.
All over the shop. They are so all over the shop. It's absolutely amazing.
And anyone who's listened to this series so far, you'll expect that. Because everything we've said about the German command structure is that it's totally chaotic. And it's chaotic because that's the way Hitler likes it. It's chaotic because that's the way it's evolved.
Yep.
It's chaotic because the personalities in it tend to the chaos, don't they? Is the other thing. All these ambitious people trying to make their mark, and
absolutely
all these lazy people trying to get as little done as they possibly can. It's really, really interesting. And there's no strategic overview, so they don't all know what they want to do, what they're trying to achieve as a single body.
Yeah, and the amazing thing is Rommel's headquarters at La Roche-Guyon that we talked about in earlier episodes. He's away seeing Lucy and giving her shoes he's bought her in Paris.
Yep.
On his way to kind of do his latest pitch to the Führer.
About how he should fight the invasion, which is happening.
I mean, can you believe it? I mean, you couldn't make it up, could you?
No.
So Max Speidel, who is his chief of staff, is sort of basically left in charge. And he's had Ernest Junger for dinner the night before and a few other people. And they're absolutely, they're half cut. They're still sort of drinking brandy at 1 a.m.
Yeah.
So his brain is completely addled. And even at 6:15 a.m., he's like, "Oh, this can't be the main invasion."
It's incredible.
Surely not. And then at 6:45, Max Pempsel, who's the chief of staff at 7th Army, rings von Salmut, who is the 15th Army commander, so the next one up, the other side of the River Orne, all the way up through, Le Havre, Dieppe, and all the rest of it up to the Pas de Calais. He tells them that there's a massive bombardment and no landing where they are in Cherbourg. And Salmut just goes, so the enemy invasion's failed already then.
It goes back to bed.
It goes back to bed. He's so had it with this war.
Well, then Rommel at 6:20 rings, is it the invasion? Speidel goes, we'll find out now.
He goes, I don't know. He goes, then find out now. So Speidel rings back at 10:15. It's like 4 hours later. Oh, yeah, but I reckon it might be. It's 4 hours later. So Rommel doesn't leave Ulm, his house in Swabia, until 10:30 a.m.
Unbelievable.
Meanwhile, 10 a.m. Hitler's woken up and told about the landings. So unlike Anzio.
I mean, the other thing is, given his chat with the Japanese ambassador a few weeks previously, where he's gone, well, it could be Normandy. I think it will certainly be Normandy. Or it will be Calais. Or maybe Norway.
Or it might be Brittany.
Or it might be Brittany. Who knows? My genius has not yet told me. And he basically, he still doesn't know, does he? Because he thinks it might be Brittany, it might be Calais, it might be Norway. He's got no idea.
He's got no idea. And he's bluffing it out and saying, he's trying to pretend that he's completely master of everything. Yeah. And he knows exactly what's going on. And why don't you just say, I don't know what's going on. I don't know what, help me out, boys here.
Yeah, find out.
Anyway. So he's talking about that. So he prevaricates, and they want to move these Panzer divisions. You've got 21st Panzer, which is already in Normandy. So this is Hans von Luckenko and commanded by General Major Feutinger, who is a kind of fat Nazi, has no experience commanding armour at all. Next nearest is 12th SS, Hitlerjugend Waffen-SS Panzer Division, who are kind of near Paris. And then the other one is the Panzer Lehr, which is probably the best single unit in the entire Wehrmacht, commanded by Fritz Bayerlein, who's brilliant and, an Eastern Front and North Africa veteran, and so has fought the Allies. Panzer Lehr are near Le Mans, which is kind of 80 miles away. And they don't get going till kind of 4. And it's not until 2:32 that 12th SS is given permission to move, and not until 4 p.m. that the bulk of the division is released.
And this is the same across the board, isn't it?
It's across the board. So it's 16 hours after the first reports of enemy troops landing do the first units of the 12th SS Hitlerjugend Panzer Division get going, commanded by the very colourful Standartenführer. Well, no, he's the commander of SS Panzer Regiment 25 at this point. He soon becomes commander of the 12th SS
Panzer Meyer,
but
yeah.
This is Kurt Panzer Meyer. We knew what was in front of us. The magnificent young soldiers looked at us with laughter in their eyes. They had no fear. They were imbued in a belief in the rightness and justice of the German cause. The young soldiers went to war superbly trained. There were few divisions that had been trained so well.
Yeah, well, fine.
Reminds me of Donald Trump.
Well, also,
so good, the best.
Exactly, but it is like that. Well, great, maybe they are, but like the people who are in charge of where they're going to go and what they're going to do are clueless.
Well, and even General Marx, who generally gets a very good press, he's hugely experienced, has been a wise old bird in the run-up to D-Day, but has completely lost the plot at this point because he sends the one mobile reserve he's got in his armoury outside of the Panzer divisions, of which he has no control whatsoever. The only mobile troops that he has any control over is Oberst Karl Mayers, not to be confused with Panzer Meyer, of the 915th Regiment, which has been converted into a battle group, a Kampfgruppe.
On their bikes.
And purloined trucks from the Frenchies. And this is of the 352nd Infantry Division. So this is one of the regiments of the 3 regiments of the 352nd Infantry Division. And he sends them off after Operation Titanic Ruperts, which are these kind of dummy SAS-led paratroopers that have been dropped south of the Murderay.
Distractions.
Distractions. And he sends them off after that at 3 a.m. in the morning. And he should have known better. He should have realised that this is any airborne troops are kind of harbinger of something more to come.
Yeah.
And keep your powder dry. And he doesn't. So he sends them off. And, by 9 a.m., this mobile reserve has already travelled 30 miles on their kind of bicycles and poorly functioning French trucks.
So, if you had to, because I'm keenly aware that we're trying to canter through this and get this done in an hour, and we've already failed.
It is D-Day.
It is D-Day, and that's the thing. So, if we have to sum up at Omaha, by lunchtime at Omaha,
I think by 10 o'clock it's all over.
Right, okay.
It's not all over, of course, it's not all over. But, it is no longer in any doubt what the outcome is going to be.
By 12:30, Colville has fallen, so they're in. And at Utah, when would you say that's?
Like 8 o'clock in the morning.
You see, this is amazing, isn't it? And the Breakhorn Manor, the famous Dick Winters,
doesn't start till 8:30.
I know. Isn't that interesting?
They're already ashore 2 hours.
I know. But you get the sense you get from that, if you are a Band of Brothers fan, is that sort of happens later in the day.
Yeah. Because you think that the crucial thing is you've got to stop these guns because otherwise they're going to destroy the effort at Utah Beach. Well, no, because Utah Beach has already fallen. Yeah. It's not helpful to have 4 field guns firing at you. High, heavy caliber field guns. So, it's jolly useful to get rid of them. But the Breakhorn Manor action takes all day.
Yeah.
It's not until the afternoon that the last of the 4 guns is silenced. And the whole thing is cleared up when Shermans from Utah Beach arrive.
Yeah.
And I think Omaha Beach is all over really by 9 o'clock because that's the point that the 3rd, 16th, which is from the 1st Infantry Division, they capture WN60, which is on the kind of eastern end, and that's a really key one.
And Gold?
Yeah, same sort of time. Well, when Bob Palmer knocks out Le Hamel,
that's it.
That's because there's already reams of vehicles and armoured fighting vehicles, in land.
And then Hillman, which we were talking about. So the Norfolks end up in the end. I mean, they lose 150 casualties, don't they? But because they try going round it.
Well, what happens is it's the Warwicks. It's the Suffolks do the attack. They realise it's a much stronger position than they realise. They then fall back. I think, is it the Norfolks or is it the Warwicks? One of them goes round the edge and they lose a kind of like 150 casualties just like that.
Yeah.
But just very quickly, just go back to Omaha, because there is this rumour that, Bradley is so worried that he's kind of thinking of and this comes in kind of later memoirs that are written in the 60s or whatever. But on the diary that's written at the time, Chet Hansen, who is his chief aide, says, Bradley shows no sign of worry, and that's at 1:30.
Yeah,
and he gets sent ashore, at 12:30 because Bradley doesn't know what the hell's going on. He can't see, radio chatter is all very confused. There's no clear picture whatsoever. So he goes, Chet, you need to go ashore and kind of find out what's happened. Chet Hansen lands ashore. There's, a bit of firing, the odd mortar landing nearby, but he's absolutely fine. He wanders around, has a bit of a chat, gets back in the boat, reports back to Bradley at kind of 1:30, and Bradley goes, great, all seems to be in hand then.
Yeah,
and it is.
Yes. So, briefly, what could the Germans have done differently on the day?
Not a lot.
You see, this is it, isn't it?
I mean, so I should we should finish up with what happens with 21st Panzer, which is the only Panzer division around. So Hans von Luck's regiment, I think it's 22nd, he heads down south towards the Breville Ridge, gets nowhere, gets stopped by the Paras and the Commandos. Opelm Bronikovsky can't get through Colne, so has to do a massive circle round with his Panzer regiment.
Yep.
Actually, inadvertently goes straight down between Sword Beach and Juno Beach by chance.
Yeah.
But the staff's yeomanry, who are supposed to be driving towards Caen, see them coming and lay in an ambush with their Fireflies, which are their upgun Sherman tanks of their 17-pounders, and knock out 13 tanks in less than 13 minutes.
You see, these engagements, why I asked that question, Jim, because, if you're Rommel, what we do is we push our panzers and at them and they'll go into the sea. Well, no, they won't.
No.
Sorry, that isn't going to happen. And this is both of those encounters also don't factor in, those aren't Allied air power interdictions in the land battle.
Yes, which they all talk about. So what happens to the poor old Kampfgruppe Meyer, from the mobile reserve from the 352nd, is they go off after the Titanic Ruperts, then realise that's a wild goose chase, then get told back again. So then come back and they're told to send off one company towards... Is it a company of one battalion towards Omaha Beach? But the rest, I have to do a concentrated counterattack in the middle of the line, which is between kind of Asnel and Crepon, which is the Gold Beach sector.
Yeah.
And all the way, they're harried by Yarbos, fighter bombers, Allied fighter planes going and strafing them. So they abandon their bicycles because they're too conspicuous going down roads in bicycles, move across fields by foot, which of course takes them a whole long time. Don't forget, already they've travelled all the way, 30 miles to the west.
They're all knackered.
Then they've got to come back again. So they're all absolutely knackered. They're being shot up to pieces. And when they do finally launch their counterattack at 3:30, the British from 69 Brigade and from the 231 Malta Brigade have seen them coming and lying away and just shoot them to pieces. Oberst Meyer is killed. The whole thing goes to pot, and that's that.
Yeah.
I mean, the Allies fly 14,674 sorties, and the Luftwaffe around 120.
So this is it. So it does sound terribly one-sided when you put it like that. But the thing is it has to be one-sided, or this will not work.
No. Oh, and just to explain that a sortie is an individual combat flight.
Yeah, so it's not a plane. So that's people flying 2 or 3 times a day.
No, but what it means is that 14,674 flights have been flown. I mean, that's a hell of a lot.
Yeah. So losses at Omaha, 29th Infantry Division lose 321 killed in action. 1st Infantry Division 107.
5th Corps, including Rangers tank crews, 349.
And 65 naval casualties between the American Navy and the Royal Navy. So 842, which is 2.8% of those who landed on D-Day.
On Omaha Beach.
On Omaha Beach.
Yeah. And it's not, I'm not trying to say, Omaha Beach was a cakewalk. I mean, if you're in those opening, if you're an A company of the 116th Infantry, it was a total slaughter and an absolute, it was horrific. And it absolutely was Bloody Omaha. But it needs qualifying because it wasn't all awful. It depends on where you landed, what time you landed, and so on and so forth.
And before we wrap up, what were the expected casualties for D-Day?
About 30,000.
And on the day, it's 4,725, including MIA, right?
Yeah.
So they brought it in well under
No, there's about 12,000 casualties in total. The 4,725 is from Omaha, but a lot of those are missing in action who then turn up. So it's nothing like that. So actually getting precise casualties for D-Day is very difficult.
It's really difficult, yeah.
But we do know precise dead. Proportionally, the highest casualties amongst the Canadians, who also get the furthest inland.
Yeah.
So they get within 7 miles, they get 7 miles inland. And Gold Beach, they could have taken Bayeux on the first day.
Yes, yeah.
They choose not to, but they basically surround Bayeux, but they are inland. And what you get is these series of semicircles kind of from each of the beaches going inland. And the key in the days that follow is turning the individual bridgeheads into a consistent lodgement.
Turning it from ink blots into one great big smudge.
One big smudge, and getting as much men and material onto the Normandy shores as quickly as possible before the inevitable counterattacks happen. But there are these huge advantages, which is the Germans have released the Panzers very, very late.
Yep.
And so what that means is they're going to have to travel by daylight, because traveling by nighttime means you've got very few hours because it's midsummer, almost midsummer. So it's very, very light. And while you're traveling along roads in daylight, you are at the mercy of the total control of the skies that the Allied air forces have. And that makes life very, very difficult indeed.
But, I mean, if we're thinking that casualties have been relatively light for D-Day itself, it's the fighting that follows where they certainly ain't. And we'll be going into the extraordinary campaign for Normandy, the battle for Normandy, in our next episode. If you want to listen to all these in one unhealthy lump, or take your dog out for its greatest day of its life, for you to go out for like 14-hour walk, then you can go to our Apple subscription channel and subscribe, or you can join us as a Patreon, become a We Have Ways of Making You Talk Patreon. And if this kind of war waffle is your cup of tea, then join us at We Have Ways Festival on the 18th to 21st of July in the summer at Black Pit Brewery, right next door to Silverstone, just off the M40, where we do a whole weekend of this kind of chat. And there'll be a great deal of focus on the events of 1944, inevitably, including D-Day. And you can find tickets for that at wehavewaysfest.co.uk. The final thought is the Allies pull off this absolutely bogglingly complex and difficult thing. The enemy has a vote, and the enemy gets its vote wrong is the key thing, right?
Yep, I think so.
But then if you load the dice the way that the Allies have done, that might well happen.
Well, when you want to do an amphibious invasion, you want to load the dice in your favour as much as you possibly can. And that's what they do.
Right. Well, we got to go. Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll see you all very soon. Bye-bye.
Cheerio.